Dr. Mark Epstein, welcome back to the show.
Dan Harris.
It's been 10 years. No, it's been probably 15 years since I met you or something like that. So
I was wondering about that. Yeah, that's scary.
I know. I think it was 2009 that I emailed you and begged you to be my friend, and here we are.
Wow, I'm glad I agreed.
Well, so when we were chatting over dinner recently about what we could talk about in this interview, you used a phrase that is so packed with meaning that I suspect we could the whole conversation could be about this. The phrase was emptiness as the mother's love.
Uh-huh.
So does that sound familiar to you?
That sounds like something I would say, yeah, over dinner. Yeah, as we got into it. Yeah.
Okay, so let's just start with that as an intriguing phrase to start a conversation. Perhaps it's best to begin picking that phrase apart with the word emptiness. What do you mean by that?
Oh, you're starting with the most difficult thing in Buddhism. Emptiness doesn't. Well, let's talk about what it doesn't mean. Okay, it doesn't mean that nothing matters, or that nothing is real, or that it doesn't mean nothingness. Emptiness. Okay, it's got another meaning from the Buddhist point of view. My friend Robert Thurman always says they picked the word emptiness because fullness was already taken. But they could have just as well said fullness, And the other thing he said about that is that the root of the Sanskrit word, which is shunyata, shunyata means emptiness. The root comes from the phrase, or whatever it's called, the SVI, svi, which means the swelling of a seed, like in a pregnant womb. So emptiness from the Buddhist side connotes like a full emptiness, the equivalent to that of a pregnant womb. So it's like the womb that holds potential. So it's got all those notes are part of it. So emptiness as relationality would be the other way to talk about it. Emptiness is the realization that nothing exists in and of itself as an independent, self-sustaining, isolated thing. So everything, including you and me and what goes on inside of us, et cetera, is connected in some way to everything else. All that is part of what the word is meant to suggest. And it's thought to be a realization that precipitates out of meditation practice. That if you just sit and watch yourself, if you sit and as we try to do, practicing mindfulness, that naturally your understanding of quote unquote emptiness or shunyata will emerge out of that process. Somewhat mysterious thing. That phrase, whatever I used when we were having dinner the other night, emptiness as the mother's love, one of the experiences that I had that led me to that was teaching at Tibet House with Robert Thurman. And he, in the midst of, I think I was talking about Winnicott and the good enough mother and, how to bring a Buddhist understanding to psychotherapy and child rearing and all of this. And he pulled out a 19th century Mongolian poem that he had once translated that began with the phrase, I was like a mad child, long lost my old mother. Never could find her, though she was with me always. And as he was reciting that poem, something in me sort of started choking up, like I was a mad child. I was like a mad child, long lost his old mother. On an emotional, psychological level, I could relate. But it turns out the poem is about the discovery of emptiness, which the Mongolian poet was calling mother emptiness, because the feeling was, oh, I've been searching and searching for this realization, and I thought it was this, I couldn't find it anywhere. I thought it was nothingness. I thought I had to get rid of everything about myself. And then I was like a mad child, long lost this thing, which had been with me always, and then he discovers emptiness as the equivalent of his long lost mother's love, in the pure relationality of his being. That was the point. So all of that was filtering through me when we were talking about this, and I could go on about it if you dare me.
I do dare you. Let me hopefully provoke the next round of going on. Probably clumsily attempting to restate the core thesis. Let me see if I can do that.
No, you're good at this. Yeah.
Well, you'll just, I want you to fact check me.
Okay.
So somebody came up with the term emptiness. Some English translator.
Nagarjuna probably was.
Oh, okay. I thought it was some English translator of ancient Dharmic principles.
Well, I think in English it was an English translator, but I think it was Nagarjuna who brought emptiness to the fore. It's not part of in the three marks of existence. Of dukkha, anicca, and anatta. They don't include shunyata as one of the marks of existence. It's impermanence, insubstantiality, and unsatisfactoriness. And then emptiness comes in a couple of hundred years later. And it's traditionally Nagarjuna whose poetry, was the original source of the concept.
Okay, so
as I understand it.
Now you've raised the bar for me even further.
Okay, sorry.
No. You should be issuing the opposite of an apology. But let me just see if I can. You just throw out some terms. Let me just see if I can unpack them.
Go ahead.
As the dummy in the conversation, and bring it down. Make sure that everybody can grasp it. In Buddhism, we talk a lot about the three characteristics. It's so funny to say we Buddhists now, because when I met you, I was
you're what?
Anything
You've joined the cult.
Yes, I have. We talk about the three characteristics of existence, the three sort of things you can see about reality if you meditate and pay attention to the world.
Yeah,
one of them
even
is,
if you don't meditate. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. The three marks of existence, they say.
The first is impermanence. Everything's changing all the time. It's not hard to grasp. The second is suffering, which is a tricky word, but it basically a better way to say it would be unsatisfactoriness. That because things are changing all the time, you're never going to get some sort of lasting satisfaction out of that next bite of cake or the next promotion, because you'll always want something more. The thing that you finally managed to grasp is in itself changing, and so life is unsatisfactory. And if you cling too hard, you will suffer. The third is not self, meaning that we feel very much like we are isolated egos navigating a dangerous world. But actually, if you look hard enough internally, you won't find some solid core nugget of self. You then went on to say that an ancient Buddhist scholar and thinker named Nagarjuna was the one who said, well, maybe there's a fourth mark of existence, and it's emptiness. I always thought that not self and emptiness were basically the same.
I think they are.
Okay.
I think they are, except not not self is self-referential in a certain way, that the way we think about it, and emptiness is a broader, that instinctive need that we have to impute thingness, into ourselves and others extends into all of experience. So emptiness is like a broader way of looking at it, I think.
Got it. So the word empty, and this is where I was starting to go before, I think it was chosen because it was trying to point to the fact that everything is empty of an essence. We might feel like there is some core nugget of us, a soul or something that findable within our mind, between our ears, behind our eyes. We may feel that that chair I'm sitting on is 1,000% chair. But actually, if you look closely at the chair or your mind, you won't find an essence of chair or Mark or Dan.
Yeah.
And that is what is being pointed to through the term emptiness. Am I close?
I think so. I mean, the essence, using the word essence as the definition of it, is I think one traditional way of talking about it. So in my mind, as you're talking, the word entitativeness is one that I have heard repeated a lot, that has sort of stuck with me. That we want. It sort of goes with certainty, that the instinctive thing for an anxious self in a scary world is to want things to be solid, certain, to have a solidity, to have a structure, to have an entitativeness that we can count on. And I think emptiness is undercutting that. Emptiness is, that's why the physicists, or the people who like to read about the equivalency of quantum physics and Buddhism, the underlying quantum reality that the physicists have seem to have pointed to fits with a Buddhist idea of emptiness. Whether it's actually the same thing or not, who knows? But it's getting at a similar kind of, oh my God, we think this is real, but we could actually put our finger through it, And there's some subjective experience of that tends to come with meditation, that can be scary, but also can give a sense of loosening up, or some kind of sense of freedom when we see that we don't have to be doing that all the time.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but that notion that emptiness or insubstantiality or lack of entitativeness is scary at first, but ultimately liberating. It feels to me that was maybe what you were pointing to when you talked about emptiness as a mother's love.
Yeah, there's some way that all this connects up with love. That the understanding that one's own separateness is illusory. If your separateness is illusory, then you must be connected, and so if we're not separate the way we imagine we are, and we're actually connected in a way that we don't quite understand, what is it that makes the connection? And so that's then that becomes sort of obvious. Like, what is it that connects us all, really? It must be some kind of love. So they, when they pull back from love, some of the Buddhists, then they just talk about relationality or relativity. That nothing exists without our observation of it. We're always in a subjective mode in our experience of the world, so the thing doesn't exist separate from our perception of it. That's another way of trying to get at the same thing, but that I feel like that can be too too remote, pulls back too much, that the actual experience of that tends to dawn in meditation is of some kind of heart opening, that, oh, I'm not just this scared, isolated person that I deep down am afraid that I am, but actually I'm a loving being. And I think that's where the mother's love comes in, that we all come from that. That's what the Mongolian Lama's poem is about. I was like a mad child, long lost my old mother, never could find her, though she was with me always. We all come from that. That's the great evolution, the great mammalian evolution, to that the mother gives birth of the child from her own body. We're immediately, like, when we make eye contact, we're immediately connected. Like the relationality is there from the beginning. So it's a kind of inherent a capacity that we all have as evolved creatures. And there's some kind of recovery of that comes through the Dharma, through meditation practice. That's the hope.
So
Does
let's
that make
talk about
sense? Does that make sense?
I think it does, and
Yeah.
I will confirm that by trying to say some words back to you. And
Okay,
then,
good.
And then you'll tell me where I've gone astray. But let's. Where I was going to go is talk about how this realization might dawn in meditation, and my goal of saying this might be to help walk people through, in very simple terms, how you could start to see something that might seem esoteric at this point in the conversation. Hopefully it doesn't, but if it does, maybe the following question will help. In meditation, one way you might experience emptiness is you start to see, and I'm basing this just on my own experiences. You pull yourself out of the world. You're on a retreat. That's the only time this has ever, quote unquote, worked for me. And many of the distractions of the world are gone. You're left in the first couple of days with your howling neuroses, and then over time maybe those quiet down just a little bit. And so by day 5 or 6 in the silence with no schedule, and or you can follow the schedule if you want, but you don't have much of a traditional schedule. You're sitting and walking all day long, a few meals. The level of inner chatter might go down a little bit, and you start to see the raw data of your senses: seeing, hearing, smelling, feeling, thinking. And then you start to see, oh, this is all happening really fast. It's pain in my knee, random thought of something I'm going to say to my boss when I get home, making a plan, hearing a bird, and boom, boom, boom. These so-called objects of meditation, the things one is aware of, start to speed up as your concentration ramps up. And after a while in this mode, you might see that things are moving too fast for there to be anything solid, including you. Where is the observer of all of this? You can't find it. And that can compute as terrifying. But the analogy that's often used is jumping out of an airplane. And at some point it's thrilling. And then at some point it's terrifying if you realize you didn't pack your parachute. And then the ultimate liberation is when you realize there's no ground to hit anyway. And so you might realize, oh yeah, there's nobody solid home here on some deep level, on some microscopic level. But that doesn't need to be terrifying. It's actually a sign of some deep and inextricable interweaving into the universe. The apex predator of all spiritual cliches: oneness with the universe, interconnection, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, I've said a lot of words there. Does any of that make sense as one logical progression?
Yeah, I mean, all of that makes sense in a way. To me, to my ears, it makes too much sense in that. No, in that it's sort of a traditional description of the progress of insight, as handed down to us through, the past couple of 100 years of the rediscovery of mindfulness and the charting of what might happen in meditation. But and I think it's valid in a kind of removed way from what the actual emotional experience of the thing might be. You and I have a friend who just went on his first silent meditation retreat and came back and reported, how impossibly difficult it was and what a struggle it was, and how after 4 or 5 days hearing an evening Dharma talk about shame and blame and so on, he came back to his room and suddenly and inexplicably started weeping, and realizing that he thought he was coming to the meditation retreat to watch his mind and watch his thoughts the way you're describing. But really, the retreat, he realized, was about listening to his heart, and that what he felt was all the anger and blame and so on that he had been generating in his, attempt to maintain control in the world, how that had been hurting his own heart, and that's where the tears were coming from. And that was such a profound realization, much more than even seeing the insubstantiality and so on of the momentary thought, the way you're describing, that was such an opening, like listening to his own heart and feeling the pain that he had been causing himself, through his own mind. I think that is actually much closer to a true progress of insight, than the way we're kind of traditionally taught it's supposed to look. But I also think it's like completely idiosyncratic, and that's part of the beauty and the mystery of it. That each one of us, if when we let ourselves go into these environments and just do the practice the way we're taught, it unfolds in a unique and personal way, even though you could chart it, as a universal kind of progression.
Amen to all of that. Just a question.
Yeah.
Our mutual friend's recent meditative insight about listening to his heart.
Yeah.
What does that have to do with emptiness?
Well, emptiness as the mother's love, it has a lot to do with it. Because I think the way it has something to do with emptiness is that in his I want to say in his previous incarnation, which is overdoing it, but in his pre-retreat mind, part of what must have been motivating his inner critic, we could call it, which you've called it in your own book. Part of what was motivating that was the need to be right, the need to control, the need for certainty, the need to blame, so that's all anti-emptiness, that's all what's the real opposite of emptiness, that's
it
all
personally.
Yeah. And being separate and trying to control and all of that. So when he feels the pain of that, the self-inflicted pain of that, what opens up is his heart, So what's opening up is the mother's love or the father's love or the husband's love or whoever he may be. What's opening up is love, which is relationality, which actually is emptiness, because it's interconnection, and the lack of separateness, et cetera, et cetera. If any of this is real, it has to be. It's not like there are alternate realities that you can stumble into through. It's love or emptiness. It has to be intertwined, I would think.
That to me seems like it's worth unpacking. not because I'm skeptical, but just because I don't yet fully understand it. But I think what you're saying there is one can open one's heart. In other words, experience love and a sense of connection with other people. And that is, I think you're saying that is emptiness. That is seeing
Yeah,
in some
that
way
is what I'm saying.
it's in that you might not get the classical Buddhist insight into the self being an illusion, or the insubstantiality of everything in the universe, but simply seeing that you are connected to others, that you have this capacity to love, that is emptiness.
Well, the big critique, of mindfulness, as you and I have practiced it, the big critique from people who sort of try it but find, I don't know if it's for me or not, or who are coming from other spiritual traditions, the big critique is that it's too dry, and that it's so mental, and that where's the love, but I think it's there, and it's there in this way that we're trying to unpack. But it's not always presented that way. It's often taught in the way that you were first formulating it just 10 minutes ago or so, that you're sitting from this observing place and you're seeing things on a finer and finer level, that your notes per moment, your ability to note, you could define it mathematically, and as it increases, your understanding, your insight also dawns, et cetera. And there's a way that is, I think, keeping the emotional experience, the actual emotional experience of sitting with yourself mindfully over time, and what are the actual realizations, the personal realizations. How are you really? What are you reflecting on? In your mind, what motivation is changing as a result, and that's just not always talked about so easly. But the personal experience, when someone comes and reports, sorry, I'm cutting in on you. When you listen, when you're there as a teacher and you're really listening to people's emotional experience, it's much richer than just the generic progressive insight thing.
Yeah. So just to the progressive insight, as you said before, that's a term of art for one of the. I love that. I love the fact that when you talk, as soon as you start talking about enlightenment, you're in an argument. And so one view of how enlightenment happens is in the old school Buddhism is called the progressive insight. And you, Mark, are saying that there's a way in which that can be a little bloodless. And I'm wondering, when you talk about the important realizations that are there to be had about your emotions and your relationships, from a Dharma standpoint, couldn't those be kind of dismissed as content or stories, the type of thing we're trying to transcend through seeing the reality of momentary existence?
Yeah, I think all too often it gets dismissed a little too easily. Like even in your book, what's the subtitle of 10% Happiness?
I can't fucking remember. It's too long.
You can. Come on. Well, it's like
it's like how I tamed how I reduced stress, tamed the voice in my head without losing my edge. A true story. I found self-help that actually works. A true story.
Yeah. You had so many, but anyway, it's like for me, what I remember from that beginning story of yours, it's like the inner critic thing, like the way, and then you sort of play with that as I'm 10%, maybe it improved me by 10%. But you discovering the sort of nastiness of your mind, that had affected your personal interactions, Like that was huge. That and people relate to that. You know, that's not just like an incidental mind moment. You know, to be treated like any other. You know, that was a real life-changing insight in your own way. That's similar to our friend that I was talking about, where you were feeling the pain that you were causing yourself. You know, and instinctively, once confronted with that, instinctively you wanted to change. You know, like that kindled something in your heart. Not to overdo it, not to get too, you know, stupid about it, but you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying.
It did,
and I'm you're 1,000,000% correct. I'm just playing devil's advocate a little bit.
No,
here
I know.
Yeah, I could imagine from the standpoint of some schools of Buddhism, the argument might be, and it's hard for me to play devil's advocate with much authority because I'm not a Buddhist scholar, but I could imagine the argument would be, well, what's truly liberating isn't just seeing how nasty the inner dialogue is, but seeing that the inner dialogue itself is insubstantial, is empty. You don't need to take it personally. It's all just spinning subatomic particles of the mind.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really important and necessary, because just seeing, oh my God, look what my mind is really like, doesn't automatically free you from it. You know, when you come home from the retreat and your family is irritating you like they always have, and you know, my mind, you know, when I come home from a retreat, my family is like, oh no, you know, because he's like worse than ever, you know, because I'm like sensitized to myself, you know, everything is like too much, and it's not like it's a miracle transformation. You know, it shows you see how painful it can be, and then you have to work with it. And in working with it, that's when, those critical thoughts that seemed so valid, you know, like I know I'm right about this, and I have to make my point and extract the apology and so on. Like those are just thoughts, you know. When you really look at them, they're completely insubstantial, and I don't have to be run by those kinds of thoughts, even though they keep coming. You know, they're as relentless as ever in my mind. But as Joseph Goldstein always says, you know, it's not what's happening in your mind; it's how you relate to it. Mm-hmm. And so, what's changing from the meditation is that I don't have to relate to those thoughts as if they really matter, you know. I can start to see them just for what they are, as like a drag, you know. But as Joseph, the last retreat that I was on with Joseph, he was like, I realized that a thought is just a little bit more than nothing, you know. Yeah. And I thought that was such a good phrase.
I mean, working with thoughts is a great way to see the three characteristics right there. One is they're just changing all the time. Two, if you cling too much to them and take them personally or too seriously, you will suffer. And three, if you look for the thinker of the thoughts, you won't find him or her or them.
Yeah. But the motivation, I think the motivation for even doing all of that comes from those kinds of emotional experiences that we were talking about before. And then when you start looking at the Eightfold Path in that regard, you know, right intention or right motivation, you know, right speech, right livelihood, whatever they all are, that starts to come alive for me, you know, as, you've had a little bit of a realization now. How are you going to work with all of this in real life?
So just a reflection and then a question for people who are new to Buddhism. The Eightfold Path is one of the first pronouncements of the newly enlightened Buddha 2,600 years ago, if you believe the scriptures, and he laid out the path to enlightenment, and there were 8 steps, and then. And it's not quite a cookbook in that you do the 8 steps and you're done. There are 8, maybe a better way to say it would be 8 components or ingredients. And they include things like right mindfulness, right livelihood, right speech, et cetera, et cetera. So there's an ethical component, a meditative component, a viewpoint component or philosophical component. And so you, Mark, I believe, were saying that, yes, you can get pretty technical about emptiness, not self, et cetera, and those realizations are powerful. But let's not forget the quality of the heart that drives you to meditation in the first place, and that can change after you've done the practice.
Yes.
And so what does that quality of the heart, in other words, my suffering might lead me to the meditation cushion, and my insights on the practice might lead me to being less of a jerk to myself and others.
Yeah, that's the phrase you use, less of a jerk. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I use asshole, but what does that have to do with emptiness?
Well, again, I think it comes back to like when you're observing your own mind, you're not just like seeing random thoughts, it's not just the incidental randomness of your mind that makes such an impression. What you're seeing that's bracing, and potentially motivational and transformative is you're seeing what a jerk you are, or what an asshole you can be, what an addict you are, how much pain you're causing yourself, how angry you are, that's what the real emotionally laden experience is, and that's where what are we longing for? We're longing to be free of the the self-inflicted pain. There, certainly there's enough other inflicted pain that we are also longing to be rid of. But so much of it is self-perpetuated. Even when there's been terrible experiences that have happened earlier. So much of the residual feeling is self-perpetuated, and that's what one sees when one sits down to meditate. If you're unlucky. So what does that have to do with emptiness? We naturally take all of that very seriously. One of the writers and psychoanalysts who I look up to the most is this guy, Adam Phillips, who's a British child analyst who wrote the first biography of Winnicott, who's another important figure in my mind. But Adam Phillips, in one of his many books, talks about how the nostalgia for how we were mistreated in our childhood, the need to go back and extract an apology or an acknowledgement or make things better. How that's our most violent nostalgias. Is the phrase that he uses. Like we really want that. We really feel aggrieved, or at least I do, and that desire for, it's almost a kind of vengeance, it is deeply embedded. And I think that's one of the one of the most profound meditative experiences, and so to begin to unpack that is to experience emptiness. If that desire for vengeance is empty of self, then imagine how liberating that could be. So that's where, me being a psychiatrist and a therapist and so on is, the Buddhist view has been helpful for me. Because everybody comes with some version of that.
The Buddhist view is helpful, but you've spent many, many years and many, many books wrestling with some of the tensions between the psychological view and the Buddhist view. And I think a lot of it goes back to the question I asked earlier, that this temptation from a Buddhist standpoint to dismiss might be too harsh of a word, or maybe it's the exact right word, the stories of our lives.
Yeah, I don't think there's any need to dismiss the stories, because the stories themselves contain the emptiness that is real,
So you can look at the desire for revenge or any other story that's been swirling since childhood or since through your ancestors or through your past lives, if you believe in that kind of thing. You can look at any of those stories and see the insubstantiality, and there's emptiness right there.
You can see the clinging. And you can see the way that those stories are being turned into self, and you can see the selfing, we might say, or the clinging. And it's in seeing the clinging that it liberates itself, right? Like when you release the clinging, what's left? And that's the insubstantiality that you're talking about. But I don't think you can leap over the clinging just to see the insubstantiality. I think you have to actually, like the Tibetans say, in order to find the self that doesn't exist, you first have to identify the way you experience the self. You can't just say, "Oh, it's not real." You have to really feel it deeply, how you experience your separate self. Where's the Dan Harris in you? Where's the Mark? Where's the Mark in me?
And to not do that might be a kind of what's referred to as spiritual bypass.
Yeah. To not. Spiritual bypass usually means, something's bothering you, but you're not going to look at the thing that's bothering you. You're just going to watch your breath. And so you're never going to deal with, what's wrong in your relationship to your kids or your spouse or your work or whatever. You're just going to be like, I'm cool, But this is even more. This is like a bypass on another level. Like if you really want to understand selflessness, you first have to find the self that doesn't exist. And where is it? Where is it in you? And only you can find it.
And to make this even trickier, there's a paradox at work here, because on a deep level, on the subatomic level, the self doesn't exist. But on the conventional level, the chair I'm sitting in is a chair, and the guy I'm talking to is Mark. And so you kind of have to hold these two things in your mind simultaneously.
Yeah, the guy you're talking to is Mark, but who is Mark talking back? From inside of Mark, it's much murkier. Like, yes. I appear to you as Mark, and you know me as Mark, and we've known each other since 2009 and whatever. But inside of me, like, where is the Mark? Like, I remember myself from nursery school when my mother would come to pick me up, and I didn't want to go. But she would say the Mickey Mouse Club is on, and I wanted to see Annette Funicello, So, and I remember that, like that's an early bit of Mark, But when I dig down looking for Mark, like what do I find? And there is, but it's not like there's nothing. There's like stuff like that, So what do you do with that? And there's a grievance that I've been nursing, since before I can remember, about maybe something should have happened, something more should have happened, than did happen, that got preserved in me as a different kind of emptiness, like what's wrong with me? Something's wrong with me. I don't really know what it is, but that you you seem to have more of whatever it is, than I do. And I'm a little insecure as a result. And that's like, I really could identify with that as that sort of essence of Mark, but that's ridiculous, but it's not, because spent a fair amount of time in therapy trying to figure that out, so that's all interesting.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying is that you can look inside yourself, and and when you look inside yourself, you see, as you said, a different kind of emptiness. Like, part of the story of Mark is that there's some dysfunction, there's something missing or wrong that other people seem to have, and we all, I think, have stories like that, whether they're examined or not.
Everybody doesn't. Not everybody does, but there are some people who don't. But a lot of people do.
Well, but everybody's got some story internally. It might not have to do with unique. Most people
seem to. Most people seem to. Yeah.
And there's a way, from a Buddhist standpoint, that, and this may be a misinterpretation of what's being said from the front of the meditation hall, but often there at least is an intimation that, hey, let's not get too hung up on these stories, because the point here is to see not the content of the mind, but the process of the mind, the way the mind works. And I think much of your work has been about, whoa, actually, there's data in these stories that can bring us to deep dharmic understandings of things like emptiness.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think that a lot of my work has been trying to make room for that and to see the validity of that approach. That there is material there that's worth paying attention to from a dharmic perspective. That the seed of the self that doesn't exist, it lies in that content, or in the content. Lies in the content, or at least in the clinging to the content.
Right.
And you can't get to you have to get to the clinging in order to not cling. And the way to get to the clinging might be through the content, not just dismissing the content.
Yeah, just to see, how am I relating to this old story I've got? Yeah. And once you can, this is a tricky word, but like detach or be non-attached vis-a-vis these ancient storylines, as you said earlier, okay, well, what's left then? What's left then is you can see, well, this is a passing, a repeated pattern in the mind, but I can't put my thumb on it. Like, I can't find these thoughts. I can't find, it's like grasping at a cloud. And that is where a key learning can take place.
The other day, I was listening to your one of your podcasts, and you were quoting Ram Dass as being a connoisseur of his neurosis. Like, that's where the meditative path had led him. And I remember him talking, instead of seeing them as big monsters, they start to appear as little shmoos, he would say. And so I really like that. Like, that's more along the lines of what I think you and I are talking about here, that by not just dismissing, but by finding the way we inflate the content or cling to the content, and then seeing the humor in that, the sort of tragic humor in that we can lessen either the hold that it has over us, or that's one way of saying it, or the way we cling to, that violent nostalgia. And that you could talk about the progress of insight in those terms also. That in becoming a connoisseur of your neurosis, you're also becoming a connoisseur of the insubstantiality of your neurosis.
Hey, as you may know, this show, 10% Happier, has a companion app where you can go and learn how to put into practice all the great things you learn here on the show. As I like to think about it, it's like in college, the podcast is the lecture, and the app is the lab, where you can go and pound all of the wisdom from the show directly into your neurons. The app is also called 10% Happier. It's available wherever you get your apps. Go ahead and download it today. Let's get back to mother's love. The way I hear it is, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying before about jumping out of an airplane, seeing the insubstantiality of like everything, can be deeply destabilizing, right? Because it's like, I have nothing to stand on here. There's no ground. They often refer to this as the rolling up the mats stage of meditation. I think what you're saying is, it might compute initially as scary, but it's pointing to something deeply reassuring, which is this embeddedness in everything that exists. There is no essence of Mark. Mark is made up of all sorts of non-Mark elements, atoms from the first exploding stars, et cetera, et cetera. And that actually should be really comforting, and that's tied to the mother's love because it has to do with with relationality.
Well, let me say it a different way.
Right.
There is an essence of Mark, and the essence of Mark would be love.
Mm.
What is a mother's love? A mother's love is such that in the face of the child or the infant's ruthless attack or aggression, a mother neither abandons or retaliates, right? A mother stays present, through anything that the infant throws at her because she loves the child, because the child came from her. So that ability to stay present, to not retaliate and not abandon, that's what we're doing in meditation with ourselves. We're staying present with everything. We're not clinging, we're not condemning, we're not holding on, we're not pushing away. I mean, at our best. Not that anyone really can do this, but we're trying. But a mother really does this. There's no choice. A good enough mother, doesn't retaliate, doesn't abandon, and that capacity to be neither one nor the other is what helps a child, what helps an infant, relativize their anger, their aggression. That's what helps a child not think that their anger is totally destructive. Because no matter how angry they get, no matter what they throw at the mother survives. So therefore, their anger is not murderous, right? And because the mother survives, then the child gradually grows into an ability to empathize with her as a separate person who they don't have total control over. You follow all this?
Yes, I'm in the back of my mind, I'm trying to connect it to emptiness, but I'm with you thus far.
Well, emptiness as pure relationality, that's how it connects. The mother's love, her ability to stay present, no matter what, makes the child's anger not be total. Not be that thing about the entitativeness of the anger, it makes the anger be relative because it can't totally destroy. So that right away is the experience of the emptiness of the anger. It's like, okay, it flares up, it doesn't destroy. The mother's still there. The child thinks, I'm gonna pound you to bits because you didn't give me what I wanted immediately, and then there she still is, and what a relief, you're still here, and so that in a reduced primal form, that's what we're doing in meditation also. We're both mother and child in the meditation.
Right. And this is what is sometimes referred to as reparenting.
Yes.
A term you don't love.
I don't mind. Yeah. We're replaying something where, that early dynamic is, there's a second chance at all of that. It doesn't always go perfectly when we're young, which is why we're left with these feelings of grievance that we hold tightly to, but then when we're on the meditation retreat and we're just with ourselves and we're seeing how all that patterning, all that conditioning has affected our minds, we have a chance to do it over again in a different way because we're not just the child anymore.
And I apologize for if any of this is obtuse. I'm struggling in my mind to connect it to insubstantiality, emptiness, this kind of absolute interconnection. And I think what you're saying is reality is doing for us what our moms, if we had one, did ideally, which is, that's as far as I can take it. The
word absoluteness that you just used. I think that's the when we're angry, we're really angry. We think we're absolutely right. That's what's fueling anger. A baby, an infant, angry is absolutely angry. Right? There's like nothing but the anger. The mother's ability to temper that, to ultimately to joke about it, to lighten it for the child. Like what do you do? You have a kid. You remember when he was little. When the child's hungry or tired or can't get what they want and having a fit, the inside you might feel like you just want to slap them down and shut them up, or leave the room, but you're not going to do either. You're going to stay with it. And if you're lucky, you're going to gradually distract them or, give them something to play with or joke a little bit about, I know it's all right. You're pissed. Come on. So that the gradual lightening that you're doing instinctively, that's what we're doing in meditation. The thoughts come, the memories come, the anger come, the emotions come, the difficulties come, and we're just there. Okay, another thought, not clinging, not condemning, not holding on, not pushing away, just allow, be open, see the humor in it. We're just doing that. We're just doing that to ourselves. Because our minds are like that angry infant that we haven't really come that far, except we're also like we have that maternal capacity. It's not just maternal, it's paternal also. We have that parental capacity. That's what mindfulness is. A mother does it instinctively. She doesn't have to go to a meditation retreat to learn how to be a mother. It's there in us already. We're on the meditation retreat, we're laboriously bringing it out, listening to Joseph Goldstein tell us how to do it. But it's in us already. We wouldn't have gotten this far if we hadn't gotten some of it when we were little, So we sort of know it. We feel it when you find the balance in mindfulness, that you have it. It rings true and you can kind of settle into it. And that has a calming effect on the emotional body, not just on the thinking mind.
All of that makes complete sense. Where I fear that some level of thickness on my end is connecting it to insubstantiality.
Mm-hmm. Well, that relationship between absoluteness and insubstantiality, I think that's the important link. Like, we take ourselves so seriously, but when you start to lighten up about it, that's where the insubstantiality starts to creep in.
And I think maybe where I'm going in my head with this, that's causing the confusion that I fear is almost entirely on me, is I keep waiting for you to make an argument that you may have already made, but I missed, which is something about that, like, once you get rid of the essence of, once you see through this illusion of entitativeness, some sort of, stop imbuing some sort of permanence and essence, and coreness to yourself and others and other people and other things in the universe, what's left is a mother's love. What's left is relationality.
Well, what's left is everything. Like what I'm imagining, listening to you, rephrasing what I'm trying to say, say, like, when I go on a meditation retreat, I'll just do it from a personal point of view. When I come into the retreat, I'm basically obsessed with my own reality. When I sit and close my eyes and what am I? I'm thinking about my life, my family, my patients, my what I'm upset about, what I'm not upset about. I'm very self-centered in the deep recesses of my own mind. I'm very self-centered, because what else would I be? I'm just carrying my own experience, and I'll think back to nursery school and to my first girlfriend and my divorce. So whatever it is, I'm carrying my whole history, my children, and then gradually all that, a lot of those thoughts will repeat them, those memories, all that will repeat themselves, and I'll get sort of bored with them. But some of them will be very sticky, and I can feel how identified I am with being, this person or that person and the whole trajectory of my life. And I might spend more time on the stickiness of those particular things. But as all that loosens and fades out, as I'm less self-centered as a result of just being exhausted by it, or seeing through it, as one tends to do if you're there long enough on the retreat. What's left? What's my experience filled with? What Joseph would say, open space. There's that famous Zen koan, barn burns down. It's not a koan, it's Zen haiku. Barn burns down. Now I can see the moon. So the barn burning down is like the self-centeredness burning down, disappearing. What's left? Now I can see the moon. What's the moon? And Zen, it's like, it's your awareness, or it's out, the night sky illuminated by the moon. What is the experience on the retreat becomes? It's like the outside, the walks and the wind and the trees and the birds, or the inner, the outside landscape or the inner landscape. And what's the inner landscape when you're not so self-centered? That, I think that's where the mother's love comes in. What's left when you take everything out? It's not just empty. It's really full. Like, it's not just me. There's a lot of love there in all of us, and that tends to fill the space. I think that might be true. I think that might be true.
I'll just. Oh, sorry. Were you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
No, I'll describe. Hopefully, I'm saying this in the hope that it might be in some way useful or clarifying. But the way this has worked for me, I think, is when I can get to the point of not taking myself so seriously and not being so self-centered, which is rare, but when it does happen, yeah, I do see that what is left is everything, is the world. There's another Zen haiku. I think it goes something like this. We sit together, the mountain and me. The mountain is all that remains.
Something like that. Yeah.
So it's like the me is out of the picture. It's just the world.
Yeah.
And love is a bit of a loaded term because we think about it as usually we bucket
romantic love. Yeah.
Romantic love or even parental love. But I think of love roughly as anything north of neutral. Like the innate capacity we all have to, and this is a little glib, but to give a shit, to care on some level. And that just, I think if knocking it off its plinth in that way, knocking it off its pedestal just a little bit, makes it more achievable and understandable. And when you get a sense of how interconnected you are, you start realizing that, of course, it's natural to care about everyone and everything else.
Yeah,
because
it's natural to care. Yeah. I think it's a real visceral experience. I think it actually comes and fills you, and that's incredibly enlightening. Very clarifying that we really are relational creatures. And we really are all here, part of this bigger thing, and we really do care. And that just becomes true.
Do we need to go on a meditation retreat to have this dawning realization? Can we have it in regular life?
Yeah, I think you can. I think one can get it in all different kinds of ways. It's mostly that it doesn't stick around. Like you can take a psychedelic drug and have a big experience of it, but I know a lot of people who've taken a lot of psychedelic drugs and not really been transformed by it, I think you can have that experience in a good therapy. You can have it in just taking a walk. You can certainly have it on a meditation retreat. It's more the persistence of it is, I think, where the real challenge is. To know it in an ongoing way so that it actually changes the way you behave. That's a hard one, I think.
Well, you called it a challenge. How do you personally meet that challenge?
Personally, in doing the work that I do, in terms of being a therapist with people, when I'm just doing that, it's sort of like being focused in a meditation. It's much easier to keep myself out of it, or to hone whatever it is that I am for a distinct purpose, being trying to make a difference for the other. I think I'm much more dangerous in my regular life.
Because the I reasserts itself.
Yeah.
Our mutual friend, Michael Vincent Miller, who used to be your therapist when you were younger, and is a couples therapist for me and my wife. You introduced me to him. Thank you. Wow. He's amazing. And Michael, if you're listening, I know you're working on a new book. When that comes out, I want you on the show, please. He talked to me. We had a conversation that I found to be devastating. He didn't mean it to be devastating, but he said that you, Dan, this is him talking, are kind of like the apex of the Western man, Western human, in that you've worked a lot on I skills, the letter I skills, achievement oriented skills, but you need to get better at you skills, other people stuff. And I heard that as well. This kindly elderly therapist is telling me I'm a monster, but he didn't mean it that way. And this was 5 years ago, and I have spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I'm saying this because I think it rhymes with what you're saying about the challenge of remembering our relationality. Is you need to develop these skills that help you turn down the I. That's Miller's term, and be more focused on other people. So for you, it happens naturally through 8 to 10 hours a day of therapy. For the rest of us, we need to find the skills, meditation, or being a patient in therapy, taking walks in nature, whatever. We need to find the skills to turn down the I and turn up the you. Does all of that, does that go down easy for you?
Yeah, I think that all sounds right to me. I would just add what I was trying to say before, which is that I think the way of turning down the I is to truly experience the I.
Yes.
So in taking that walk, it's not just getting away from the I, which is a little bit, when I was saying that in my work, there's a little bit of that in what I'm saying, that I'm just turning myself off. And so then, when I come back into my life, there I am again, so I'm saying I'm optimally, that wouldn't be the ultimate best thing to be doing. In taking the walk, to pay attention to the I, thereby to release some of the clinging to the I-ness of it, to the grievance of it. I think that's where, to the loosing, like what our friend who I talked about at the retreat, that like listening to his heart, feeling the self-inflicted pain, that's been going on unconsciously. I think that's where the hope is, that we actually can do that for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And there's some of the reparenting that's going on in that. The way the mother helps the child not take itself so seriously, because his or her diaper is wet, that we're helping ourselves. We can help ourselves in an analogous way.
Another little anecdote here, personal anecdote. I always hesitate to do this a little bit because I'm interviewing you, and I don't want to turn up the I on myself. But I'm saying this because I think it might be illuminating or helpful, or at least I hope it will be. For me in my own practice, the introduction of what is often referred to as loving kindness, or metta, METTA practice, has been very helpful in doing what I believe you just described. So many people listening know what metta practice is, but it basically is, where you envision a series of beings and then send them phrases like, may you be happy, may you be safe, et cetera, et cetera. And many people don't like this practice because it feels forced and treacly and all of that stuff. And I was definitely in that category. But, a couple of years ago, I just did an experiment and really did a lot of it. And what it helped me do, I believe, is to be okay with the horrors of my own personality, to see my greed, my selfishness, my anger, my hatred, and not take it as personally. It kind of just turned up the warmth in my own mind so that I could do what I believe you're describing, which is turn down the I by getting comfortable with the I.
How did it do that, do you think? I find that interesting, what you're saying. Like,
it just made me cooler. It made me view the contents of my own consciousness with more warmth, just the way I was developing this capacity through this very forced exercise of envisioning people and saying, may you be happy, safe, healthy, live with ease. And then in the progression of metta, or loving kindness meditation, and for you skeptics out there, there's been a lot of science around this practice, and science seems to indicate that it has all sorts of physiological and psychological benefits. And the progression of these beings, you insert at some point yourself.
Yeah.
And so what I found was that as a frosty New Englander, forcing myself to bring out something that was always within me, which is this warmth. You might call it love, but again, in the broadest understanding,
compassion,
of that term,
you could
love.
Just call it. Yeah,
compassion, absolutely. I like friendliness.
I like that too.
It really I started when inevitably in my practice, the parts of my personality that I don't like would trot onto the scene. instead of, I think my practice hitherto was to note it with some sort of clinical clarity to see, oh yeah, that's anger. But I think there was a subtle aversive flick within the mindfulness that was preventing me from really being cool with it. And once I was able to bring the metta on board, it really allowed me to navigate. The whole machinery became more tractable.
Yeah. It's making me, I really like what you're saying. It's making me think, I wrote this little piece for Tricycle a couple of years ago, about an experience I had when I was, doing the audiobook of Going to Pieces Without Falling Apart. So it was a long time. It's like 25 years ago now. 20 years ago, something like that. But you've probably, as a podcast host, TV person, all that. But for me, doing the audiobook, I had never done anything like that before. And so I was in a recording studio and like in a little, like a telephone booth sort of thing with headphones on and the engineer outside of the booth. And I had to read the book perfectly. I couldn't change any of the words or cough or make a movement or anything because it had to be a pure recording. And when I was little, when I was little, I used to stutter. And I would have a really hard time when we went around the room in school and had to say our names. I could never get the M sound of Mark out. And so I would get all, hot inside myself and twisted up and very embarrassed and so on. And my parents sent me to a speech therapist when I was little, who really helped me. And I think it was like an early kind of teaching about meditation, like just how to relax myself instead of being so down on myself. But anyway, when I was in the recording booth, the beginning words in Going to Pieces, I couldn't get the first sound out. It was like a regression to when I was little. And one of the tricks that speech therapist had showed me was, if you can't say the word, if you can't say Mark, if you just start it a different way. So I would often say, my name is Mark. And somehow by inserting the phrase, my name, I could trick myself into so always, like, I haven't stuttered in a long time overtly, but inside I could sometimes feel the tendency, and I would just change the phrase a little bit and be fine. But because it was my own book and I had to read it perfectly just as it was, I couldn't change the phrase of the beginning of the book. So I was stuck inside this booth, and it was like probably a couple of minutes, but it seemed like forever. And finally, I heard the engineer in my ears saying, "Dr. Epstein, is everything okay in there?" And I was like, "Oh no, here I'm like the Buddhist psychiatrist, writing about meditation, and I can't even like read my own words." So I've tried, many years later, I tried to write about that experience in some kind of Buddhist Dharmic way for Tricycle, which is Tricycle, the Buddhist Review. And I labored over it, but finally got to the end. And I realized that at the end of the piece that the whole point was, through writing about it and reflecting on it that much, I could feel a kind of compassion in myself for my younger self, my younger self, who I both was and wasn't still that person. I'm mangling the grammar of it, but I did it better in the piece. The younger me that in some sense was still in me and yet wasn't, and that was such a essence of, even though we're not supposed to have an essence, that was such an essence of metta, directed towards a place in myself that's very sticky, whether I'm still very embarrassed about, identified with, ashamed of, mystified by, why did I stutter, but there I could, it was actually in the writing led me to that feeling of, compassion, or kindness, as you would say, friendliness. But there's something nice about writing sometimes.
Oh yes, absolutely. And there are a lot of things that are not so nice as well. But I really like that story because it is absolutely what I was trying to say. That the whole. If you can develop some warmth, compassion, kindness, friendliness vis-a-vis the most difficult and sticky aspects of your personality, then you can relax. You're not taking it seriously. And then you're more available for other people because you're less stuck with your head up your own ass. And
you're more available for yourself too.
Yes, of course. It's all, In the end, it's all the same thing in some ways.
Yeah.
Anything I should have asked but failed to ask here, Mark? This has been a lot of fun.
God knows what you should have asked. But I think you did fine. Anything I should have said that I didn't say?
No. I wasn't looking for reassurance. I just want to make sure if there was something you wanted to say that I didn't give you a chance to say.
No, I always like talking to you.
Likewise. Actually, along those lines, I do want to say thank you because you are in many ways a sine qua non of this whole crazy adventure that I've been on for the last 15 years, for sure the last 10 years since the book came out. Talking to you, people who haven't read the book, which is totally fine. Meeting Mark was, a key juncture for me in terms of getting interested in Buddhism and meditation. And I have clear memories of, having labored over this book for 5 years, and it came out and I really was worried that it was going to ruin my career or just whatever. And then it ended up doing really well. And nobody was happier for me than you. And I remember being at an event with you to help launch the book. And it was a week or so after the book came out. And you asked me how it was doing. And I told you what where it was on the chart or something like that. And it was uncontrived, what the Buddhists call mudita, this very hard skill of being happy for somebody else's happiness. So anyway, long way of saying thank you for everything.
Well, total pleasure. Thank you.
Anything else we should discuss before I let you go? Anything else you want to let people know about that you've made and put out into the world? I'm going to plug all of your books, but do you have a website where people can go or anything like that? There's a
website that just has my books on it. So
Great.
it's Mark Epstein M.D, and it just has the books. There's still a Facebook page that lists whatever events I'm not doing. I haven't been doing very much. But no, there's nothing else.
Although you and I have been plotting, we haven't figured out the details yet, have been plotting doing a meditation retreat that people can sign up for. We haven't figured out where or
I'm
when.
Excited.
Yes.
I'm interested in how that might be.
Yeah, well, I owe you an email with some more details, but yes, just everybody know that Mark and I have been plotting something special, a small little meditation retreat that people can sign up for if they're interested. And so details to come. Mark, thank you again. This was a huge pleasure. Really appreciate you.
Totally welcome, Dan. Nice for me too.